Good morning, everybody. This is the Legal and Justice Systems Committee, Subcommittee to the Incarceration Prevention Reduction Task Force. It is 11:32 on November 9. I'd like to call this meeting to order, and we will begin with the land acknowledgement statement. Before we begin, we acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional and unceded territory of the Lummi, Nooksack, Samish, and Semiahmoo people who have cared for and tended this land since time immemorial. Truth and acknowledgement are critical to building mutual respect and connection across all barriers of heritage and difference. We begin this effort to acknowledge what has been buried by honoring the truth. We pay respect to their elders, past and present. Please take a moment to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that bring us together here today. And please join us in uncovering such truths at any and all public events. All right. We've got the call to order, and I've been told we have a quorum. So the first thing on our agenda is task force communications. It kind of falls off usually at the end, but it is something the task force wants us to identify 2 to 5 public relations communications regarding past, current, or future task force initiatives from the Legal and Justice Committee. So I'm going to ask for people to give me their information, and if I don't get feedback, I'm going to start picking on people. So please, somebody respond to this question on what we want to communicate for the full task force from the Legal and Justice Committee. Thank you. All right, Stephen.
It's procedural, but I would say it's noteworthy to report that we're seeing the increasing blurring of a line between the Legal and Justice Committee and the Behavioral Health Committee, that we're increasing the frequency of our joint meetings, and that we'll continue to try to interact productively in 2022.
I completely agree with you, Stephen. I was thinking, the crisis triage center is something that's both something behavioral health and legal and justice deal with. And so that would be something I think we would put on that. And I think we need to talk to that as another talking point for communication when we go up to the joint meeting. So I agree on that end, but I was thinking lead was something for our committee to be putting as a communication point, but I don't know if we think that's a joint item as well. So that's something we do need to determine what items are part of the joint and what are specific to legal and justice. Is there any other, Arlene?
So yeah, my thoughts have been more about process than the actual content of the messages. What you're talking about now is something that is very important, I think, for the general public to know, which is that all of the things that are being represented on this task force are a big giant web of social service connections, and they are all deeply interconnected. So you pull on one thread and then it tugs at the other end, or it gets better. So, we've been working on that for a long time. So somehow when we're working with the people who are going to do this job, we need representatives from behavioral health and from law and justice section to help fill out the picture of what really needs to be said. I think it's really important for us to set goals for this task. Clear, simple goals, nothing too complicated. And then also at the end of it, to have an evaluation process to see if we've been effective in letting people know what IPRTF has been doing and what changes are going on in the social service system profound changes that so many people don't know anything about. So this is, a lot of it has to do with picking audience. I would say that's another piece of the procedural side. And that would be the general public is one thing. I think people who are activists and influencers are people who push the information forward. So that is another group. And the third would be the people who are receiving the most services. And in certain ways, that's the hardest group to reach, but it's vital because this is all about the people that get helped, or their lives are improved, or their problems are solved in some way. So that information's got to get to them.
Thank you, Arlene. I don't see any other hands, so I am going to start picking on people because I'm really good at it. And I'm going to start with Bruce because he's on the right of my screen, and I'm just going to work my way through. Bruce, is there a key communication, past, present, or future from legal and justice that you think that we would want to present to the task force from legal and justice?
Raylene, just a clarification, we're talking about something we would include in a communications report to the public, right?
Specifically, yes, thank you.
Okay.
Bruce, you're muted.
I'm giving my vote to Mr. Gockley because quite frankly, I'm drawing a blank.
All right, Jill Nixon, please.
Hi, everyone. Yes, just as background for what I'm looking for here is in your packet, there's a scope of work the steering committee has worked up and approved for a communications consultant for the task force for the purpose of informing the community about the work and the successes of the task force. One of the things in that scope of work is asking the consultant to craft a communications campaign for 3 or 4 or 5 messages that the task force members, you guys, really want the community to hear about. The plan is to ask this question of all the committees, gather all the suggestions, and then take it to the steering committees to pick and choose from all the recommendations so that we can include that in the scope of work for the consultant. So that's kind of what we're looking for here. I don't know if that clears anything up.
That's helpful, Jill. Thank you. So for example, I would say something that we've done in the past is using Bellingham started and then we added to it, and the county has their program with home detention using friendship diversion, or the other program that the county is using as a jail alternative. That is something that came from Legal and Justice. LEAD is a program that has been implemented. So I think that would be an example. So, and those are just 2 that I'm thinking off the top of my head. Sheriff Elfo, do you have any ideas to add to this communication point?
I'm sorry, I signed in late here. I was having some technical difficulty and Jill had to bail me out. So I'm not sure what the issue is. On the table, it's to look at some recommendations to put in the
Yeah, what are some of the biggest improvements and changes in jail diversion and reduction that you see in your section?
I got you. Thank you, Arlene, for bailing me out there. Well, I think in one, the more options we have with the LEAD program, Our mental health deputy program has been very viable, even though we're struggling with personnel shortages to fill one of the positions. We anticipate being able to do that and prioritizing it. Anything we could do to reduce the jail population is helpful at this point, because we are at worst critical mass that I've seen in the last 19 years as sheriff of where we are now with the population, particularly in light of COVID. So, and of course, the opening of the behavioral health center, when that gets fully functional, if they're able to achieve that, that will be a big help.
Can you give us a round figure about what you think the reduction has been over the last 2 years, let's say?
I can't off the top of my head. That's something I'm going to have to research. And today's my first day back in the office. I was out with an injury there for a while, so I will certainly get that information and get it to you.
Thank you, Sheriff Alpha. I'm going to continue picking on people. And Maya disappeared. Oh, no, there she is. Maya, do you have any feedback on this topic?
I mean, I think COVID has been the greatest reduction of jail population in the last few years. I mean, just the booking restrictions that have been put into place that really aren't anything to do with the work of this committee. But I mean, and those we've got, unfortunately, a population who are there for a much longer term because of the lack of trials. So it's a strange, it's a shift. I don't really know that maybe it's better, maybe it's less people, I'm not sure. But I guess, I mean, something that I think we should do for the community, and this is like taking a page from the Heather Flaherty book, is that we should have some available and digestible statistics and dashboards for people that they can access easily, and so that they can see, okay, you look, jail populations have gone down in the last 6 months, and is that attributable to COVID, or is that attributable to some actions that are taken proactively by the prosecutor's office or by the sheriff's office, or like what's guiding those changes in numbers? And that's a really complicated thing. I think we'd probably be better off hiring someone to do that work than just to, or maybe that is part of the scope of work. I get a lot of like agendas and stuff come in, and I pulled one up and I'm like, I don't think this is the meeting I'm in. Maybe it is. No, it's from October. I don't know. I'm sorry. I have a hard time linking. I wish we had a chat function in this so that we could pull up the agenda or something. That would be like a really nice feature to these meetings, because I'm not, anyway. So I guess that's what I would like to see a communications person do. I think that would be actually more meaningful than that would be a meaningful way to report the work. Thanks.
So do you think Prosecutor Ritchie would be the person to ask this question to?
To ask, so you're asking me the
Oh, you're here. I didn't see it. You were here.
Okay.
Well, what I meant was you have overseen so many changes in your department, and what we're asking is, what are the things that stand out the strongest that people need to know about?
So, I'm not exactly sure. I think the question is not just changes that have been made, but also changes that have come from this group. And I think we kind of, I'm not exactly sure. The biggest things that have happened here with this group have already been pointed out. I mean, the Crisis Stabilization Center is, of course, should be on the forefront. And then after that, I'm not sure. So, what I'd like it to be, and this is what I'd like it to be, and that is that we get more data. And I think Maya mentioned that, but I think that that's not something we've really accomplished at this point. But it's something that I'd certainly like to be something we can say in the future, that we were able to achieve some information that we're able to present to the community regularly. And anyway, I'll stop right there.
Thank you, Prosecutor Ritchie. I've got all kinds of hands up now, so I'm kind of excited. I can't remember who's all went out first, so I'm going to start with Sheriff Elfo, and then Stephen, and then Heather, and then Jackie.
Yeah, I just want to echo what Maya implied there too, that I think the data that we'd be looking at for the last year and a half to 2 years is going to be artificially deflated in some aspects because of the a lot of people being released from jail under that otherwise would be there, and also with the courts closing, a backup of people in the jail because they're not getting to trials. So this is kind of a really unusual period to do an evaluation that would have that we could rely on moving forward, hopefully with the COVID at some point coming to an end.
Thank you, Sheriff Elfo, and I concur. I think if we put any data out there, we also need to put in COVID, courts closing, the Blake decision, the Thurston County DOL decision with DWS certs. There's so many things that have impacted the jail at this point, as well as construction, that if we put any numbers out, we have to put, please note that all of these things have impacted the jail numbers. We can't say each one was cause and effect, I guess. Stephen?
Thanks, Raylene. I want to reframe Jill's statement just a little bit. I don't think necessarily what we need to communicate to the public is only our successful outcomes. It's more the work that we've actually been tackling, where we've gotten with that and where we think we might be going with that. And I think there are a couple of things we could say, if I could expand on the sheriff's comments and Eric's as well, and Maya's. I think we've realized that we have to build a stronger behavioral health response on the streets in the communities. We've started to do that. The sheriff has done that. And yet we've run into workforce issues, COVID issues. You know, there are systemic barriers there. And so we've at least set that goal. We've at least identified some of those barriers. We've made some progress, and we're going to have to overcome the barriers in 2022 so that we can actually have an adequate response in the community on a behavioral health level. Same with data. We had an active index committee. We realized that we had some barriers there because different offices were building different software systems, and now we need to be communicating across systems. So, you know, we're going to be talking to Dr. Harris soon about ways that we can start to integrate that. So we've worked on data. We've gotten to a point where we realize we need to bump up a level. And I think those are all, and, you know, and then in 2018, 2019, we had an immensely complex system problem we were trying to tackle. And then all of a sudden, 10 more complicating factors started swirling around with court decisions, COVID, and all the other. So I think if we just describe the world that we're working in and what we see now we need to do in 2022, I think that's a pretty powerful communication of the community of where we want to go and what our goals are.
Thank you, Stephen. Heather?
I largely agree with everything that's been said, and thanks for letting me be here as a guest today of this committee. A couple of things I want to add. So communications is critical, and I think about when George Floyd was murdered and there was a lot of energy around defund police and alternative response. And our community, us at this table, we acknowledge that actually Whatcom's done a ton of work already in these areas. But there wasn't a proactive, here's how we've been doing, and here are the things like grace and lead that exist. And yes, our leadership agrees that we need to create systems of care. So I think about a communications person anticipating and responding to the issues in the moment. The second thing though is help people understand how to get involved and engaged and participate. When all of that was happening, I don't think we had any guests come and make public comment, or very few, if any, at the incarceration task force. And this would have been a really appropriate table to receive public comment and opinions. And I think about with the housing issues in our community, which are significant, when Camp 210 was an issue, the Homeless Strategies Work Group had hours of public comment. People knew how to log into that meeting. People don't really understand how to engage and participate in this process, and I think that's critical. And then I also think bi-directional is also good. Like if there's a communications person, are they also listening and hearing from the community so that we're following the values largely of the community? Specifically too, I think people care a lot about public safety and how we are implementing some of these changes while keeping our community safe. And how do we avoid the Bellingham is dying, Seattle is dying, knee-jerk response to what we're really trying to do is invest in systems of care. And I do think there are some people who care about disparities and they want to understand the data around, do those exist in this system? I wrote these down and I can send them to you, Jill, because I know I'm going kind of fast. The last thing I want to say is I do think people care about where our government dollars are going and what the outcomes are of what we're spending. And that is related to the data. And so somehow that would be the aspirational, can we pair communications with real data? And I think we have surface level, really good data, even just things like crime rates, having an accessible dashboard about trends in crime rates, jail bed days, whatever we have, like, let's start there and see how are our tax dollars performing for us. And I'll stop there.
Thank you, Heather. Jackie?
Yeah, really good comments, Heather. Mine's a lot more simple in that the Recovery House actually started with this committee way back when. And so there was a big push from the Legal and Justice Committee that got that started, and it's about to open. It's inches from opening. Last I heard they were awaiting one staff, and I'll let you know. I just asked today if there's a date yet or if it's opened already. So I'll let you know.
Raylene, we have an attendee, call-in phone attendee with a hand raised. I'm wondering if this might be one of our absent committee members. Would you like me to allow this person to talk and identify themselves?
Yes, please.
Okay, if the person with the phone number, last 3 digits of 340, if you'd like to speak to the committee and identify yourself, please do.
So I just heard back from the Recovery House folks. Oh, sorry.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. This is Moonwater. I'm here. I'm not absent. I'm on the phone and my internet is down.
Go ahead,
Are you
Moonwater.
able to hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Moonwater.
Okay, great. I just wanted you to know I'm here. And I did have just a couple thoughts building on what Heather just shared. So one thing that's coming to mind about the communications person is that we have already done tremendous work as a committee and a task force in general to report on our activities and our future goals. And so I think we're reinventing the wheel a little bit, and I would encourage us to look at that report as maybe a next step to prioritize the tasks that we've accomplished and what our goals are. If there's some further honing that we want to do of our messaging, but that's certainly obviously a go-to place to identify the work that's been undertaking. And as it sounds like what we're trying to do, what our goal is in engaging a communications person is to help bring the community along in our work as you know, as Heather was speaking to, there's an element of transparency that we haven't yet been able to achieve with this work, and not finding the right way to communicate to the public all that we've accomplished and opportunities for engagement. So I see a goal being bringing the community along with our work, engaging them in the work. So that means identifying access points for engagement. It means being transparent not only about our past achievements, the current landscape, as Stephen was speaking to, but also the future goals, and help educate the work that's being done. So those sort of three buckets feel particularly important, along with the demonstration of the efficacy of the task force, as Heather was saying. There's huge value in the community understanding that people are coming together and putting their minds together with shared values to address the issues that the community cares about. So I would hope that that's what we're honing in on, is bringing them along in the work and messaging past accomplishments, current landscape, and future goals, which I think we've done a great job of identifying in the reports. So maybe that's a bit echoing of what's been shared, but maybe some slightly different language to use moving forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Moonwater. I think that was very beneficial for moving forward. I think we've talked about some of the past things. I guess I would want to see if there's anybody in our group that has anything that we want to focus on in the future. Data is huge. Mental health is huge. Every time I go into the jail, I hear people that are screaming or that need help. And it seems like Western State is understaffed and has issues getting into to do evaluations, or once an evaluation is done, we need facilities to bring them to. But I kind of think that might be more of a joint behavioral health, legal and justice area that we need to focus on. I could be wrong, but is there any other members that have input to speak on communication points that we want to move forward with for the full task force or steering committee? Heather.
Just underlining also what Moonwater said, in this person, I would hope would really take the steps to meet people where they're at, because it's one thing for us to just broadcast and send out newsletters or social media posts, and it's another thing to actually go to different groups and gatekeepers and leadership in the community and build relationship and have a dialogue. And I think that sometimes that's what's required, and it is a lot of work, but I think that's important.
Thank you, Heather. Arlene?
I just want to respond to Heather. If you need someone to do this, I'm willing to do that kind of work.
Thank you. Jill, I don't see any other hands on this topic. I'm going to move forward. Do you have enough to start with for our communications portion?
Yes, thank you.
Excellent. So the next item on the agenda is the domestic violence offender treatment. We've been discussing this over the last several meetings on needs. I believe Bruce was going to look into some things. I did speak with him a little bit about it, and I think Arlene had some information on it, but I'm going to start with Bruce and then go from there.
So where we left off last meeting with the part that involved me is I was going to approach the district court judges about what they thought about the idea of me and or Jake, our probation manager, approaching existing substance use disorder programs, and if they would have any interest in adding in a domestic violence program or trying to motivate them. They weren't comfortable with that. So I talked with Perry at the health department, who said that they were comfortable doing that. And so that is where we left off on that topic. I know that Jake has heard from one agency that they are looking into becoming a certified, one substance use disorder agency that is looking into becoming a certified DV provider of treatment, and they're in the process of evaluating, my understanding is evaluating the RCW and the WACs and what it takes to become an agency and become certified. So there's a possibility with that treatment provider. So that's my update.
Thank you, Bruce. Jackie?
Yeah, I think Perry offered to look into this for Bruce. And so we did some checking around, and one agency didn't respond and 2 other agencies said no due to lack of space. One of them had done the work in the past and felt they didn't have the space or the staff, and the other one said they were too busy right now and didn't have enough staff. So that's where we ended up.
Thank you, Jackie. Arlene, you had some notes on this if you'd like to share.
Yes, I contacted Joe Valentine, who is the executive director for North Sound Behavioral Health Organization. And what he said to me was that, because I was asking him about the funding, because that was definitely one of the missing pieces. And what he said was that that funding is available for treatment of DV offenders through grants and different departments. And if specialized treatment is being provided by a DV agency, then it would not be covered by Medicaid or state behavioral health funds. If the service is provided by a licensed behavioral health agency and the individual is receiving Medicaid, then it's covered by Medicaid. DSHS does provide grants for domestic violence services, domestic violence prevention, multi-year domestic violence prevention projects through DSHS. Other grant sources for DV services are state. So Seattle, Spokane, Tacoma, Vancouver, Bellevue receive grants from a program called Grant Watch. So those are some of the places where the money can be gotten to pay for these programs. So it sounds to me like money will be available, but the services, according to what you're all saying, we don't have anyone stepping up and volunteering for it. But I'm spreading the word in the programs that I'm working in, where the counselors are getting trained and going into this profession and talking to them about that there will be jobs available.
Thank you, Arlene. Bruce?
Yeah, I forgot to mention that we did hear back from that Eastern Washington provider, and they are interested in pursuing a contract that would allow them to access the DV POTS funding. And this is a program that was recommended by Amy Roberts that we be in touch with, and she helped us connect. And so we're going to begin the contract process with her. I believe all of their services, or at least the services that our local clients would receive, would be remotely through a Zoom kind of setup. And they're apparently operating in a number of different counties where there are no other treatment providers available. So that looks like that could become a possibility also. So we've begun the process of working on a contract with them.
Bruce, do they treat offenders, DV offenders?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And are they doing group therapy for that?
You know, I believe that they are, and they're doing it remotely. I know that they've worked with Amy Roberts at the state to be able to be allowed to provide remote services. And I don't recall which Eastern Washington counties they're in exactly, but I know that they take referrals from counties that don't have any provider at all. And for some of these some of these clients, court clients that need these services in that area of the state, maybe many, many miles away from the nearest provider.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. Thank you, Arlene. Steve?
I'm trying to wrap my head around all of these comments. If I understand it right, there are no substance use treatment providers who would step up and add DV treatment services, but mental health treatment providers could get paid for Medicaid recipients for treatment. And for non-Medicaid people, there are grants for those services that would also go to those providers. Is that correct?
Yes.
And Bruce, do you have any idea how many of the people who would be referred to DV treatment are Medicaid recipients? Is that any information we have?
It's not information that we have. No, I would not be able to provide any insight into that. We just don't have any of that information.
So we've talked to some DV treatment provider, or some substance use treatment providers. Have we talked to mental health treatment providers about adding this to their menu of services, or is it already there, Jackie?
Well, I just was going to say that there was a study conducted a few years ago on the jail population that actually showed that, let's see, what was it? Oh, that had to do with co-occurring disorders. But I think when people are coming out of the jail into treatment, that a good 90% of them are on Medicaid. So that's what we know just anecdotally from our treatment providers. So I was just answering your first question, and then I was absorbed with that, so I didn't hear the rest of your question.
Well, the rest of my question is basically, would it be worth our while to talk to mental health treatment providers about, if they don't already consider DV treatment part of their services, adding some capacity to do that the way we would ask substance use treatment providers?
Yeah, we could do that. I'll tell you, it's a rough situation right now. Compass Health just terminated the jail behavioral health contract about a month ago. I don't know if you had heard that. I think Perry might have mentioned it. And they did that because of workforce issues. And so in an environment where they're already having trouble finding clinicians to provide, to provide the work that most of them are trained to do, I think it would be difficult to get them to do anything extra. And one of the agencies that we asked was a dually credentialed agency that said no. So I'm just not sure. I mean, we can try it if you really think we ought to. There's maybe one or two other agencies in town that I think we could ask. But I'm sure Compass Health would say no. So that's my opinion.
Yeah, I hope you will ask those agencies, because you never know, they might be willing to expand.
So following up on some of the stuff that Bruce said and the grants that are available, I mean, I don't think from a court's perspective that we could apply for grants to help pay for this. So if there are grants available to pay for individuals to get treatment, we need to make sure that that's able to be done. I'm not sure where we would go with that, if it's something that we would ask DV SAS to assist with.
Did the county through with ARPA funds fund some grant writers? Am I making that up? Okay, Eric's nodding. I don't know, like who guides them, if it's the executive or what, but okay, Eric's all over it. I think we should tap into that resource. Eric, you can fill us in on the details.
I only know that it is part of the administration and that they are running that, and how they're going to be running the grant program, I don't know, but it is the administration, and yes, they did hire somebody to write grants.
So our task force could make a recommendation that they use the grants for those purposes. And that would be a useful thing for this task force to do.
So I imagine we could ask them to help us out for sure. I mean, that they, the administration is there to help the county function, and we could ask them for support.
So that's the first step, I think, is making sure that people that want to get the treatment and are able to get the treatment, that there's funding available. Also, it's a big kicker for these agencies that are hesitant about doing treatment, is that they're actually going to get paid for the treatment that's required. And it sounds like, drug and alcohol treatments paid for, mental health stuff is covered, but when we come to the DV stuff, that's where we're having issues. So we want to do that. We also still are short on making sure we have providers in this county. So I don't think we can ever stop asking people to assist in treatment, especially if somebody wants to do a deferred prosecution, which is now an option for domestic violence. But if you can't get the state required treatment, it's not an option because we don't have enough providers. So any input on getting more providers, and I think a recommendation to the task force to get grants for this purpose is definitely a need. Any other comments on DV? I don't think we want to drop the subject completely. I think we want to keep revisiting it so we make sure we get what we need for everybody.
Bruce, will you still be in touch with the Eastern Washington provider? And if so, do we have any sense of the timeline before we get a go or no go from them?
Well, keeping in mind that they're a state certified provider, they have been authorized by the state to provide remote services. So they're already able to take clients from Whatcom County. They meet all of the criteria. What I'm talking about, the timeline is the contract that would allow them to be eligible to submit for reimbursement the treatment services through the DV POTS program. That's what I'm talking about. Their clients are able to go to that agency right now. They're on our list of approved agencies that we have from the state. So we're not stopping anybody from going who may be able to pay for it. What I'm talking about is the contract that would allow the county to reimburse them for services provided for the indigent clients that qualify. Did that answer your question?
Partly, yeah. But if they're Medicaid recipients, it is a covered service that they don't need any other reimbursement, right?
Our funding does not interact with Medicare or Medicaid. That would be a separate source of funding for an individual. And if they qualified for that, then the pot of money that we have, this DV POTS, we would not use our funding if they qualify for other sources. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Don't see any other hands. Is there any other comments or questions on the subject before we move on? Seeing none, we're going to go on to reentry status and next steps. Jackie mentioned a little bit. I wanted to ask Heather Flaherty to join us on this topic, as there was a letter in reference to funding, and I wanted to see if we're all on the same page when it comes to reentry and a navigator and what we need, what we don't have, what we want to accomplish. Heather, go ahead.
So, go ahead, Heather.
No, I thought I was here mostly to listen. I don't have details on what we even really have right now. I can share what I think is the need in the community and what our committee's talked about. And I don't have a presentation though for you, but Jackie, it sounds like you have some details you were about to share that might be helpful.
Well, we were just talking about the contract, the new contract for jail behavioral health team services, which includes an FTE for juvenile court administration and also a reentry position, and might be able to get actually 2 reentry positions, 1 clinical and 1 peer out of the process. So we're still in negotiations about that, but I think that's really good news.
How many? 4?
2, just 2 altogether. Yeah. And no doubt that we could use a whole lot more. There's absolutely no doubt about that. But we also have to cover the jail suicide risk assessment, the jail suicide risk, and the in-jail behavioral health crisis services, which are predominant in the institution.
Thank you, Jackie. Sheriff.
And could I just add one more thing, which is the good thing about the team concept is that we can get some coverage, hopefully. And if we have 2 people kind of helping with the reentry position, I think we can get a whole lot more mileage out of it than we could out of one. Sometimes it was a half a position when we had when we were down in staff. So this is looking really good to me, and I'm hoping this agency will be able to come through and actually hire people for the position. So I'm trying to do everything I can to support them in the process of making this work.
What agency is this?
Lifeline Connections was selected to do the work.
Thank you, Jackie. I'm going to go back to Sheriff Elfo, and I'm going to put you on the spot. Sorry. But from your perspective on a reentry, what do you feel is needed for the jail? What are we seeing recidivism on, and where would it be most beneficial?
Well, I can tell you what we're seeing recidivism on is the chronic people that are in jail all the time. They're habitual offenders, and they're not showing up for court, to keeping their court dates, and they're getting rearrested for new crimes. And I think this is, I mean, just because we're in a crisis mode right now, we're not booking people on certain, well, actually on most felony warrants now, if it's a property crime, because we don't have the space. So I think we're just looking at a skewed set of data. And as you mentioned earlier, I'm glad you highlighted that, the number of profoundly mentally ill people in the facility that are in there for violent crimes that can't be released after an evaluation by the judges. They're holding them, and we're just filling up with that. That's taking all our space, especially since the wheels aren't moving in the court system to resolve their cases.
Thank you, Sheriff Elfo. Stephen?
I think the sheriff's comment gets at what my concern is in the area of reentry, and that is we mostly talked about that as an in-jail staff position, which I think is really important because it sets out a plan for how you come out into the community. But really, the reentry work is out in the community, much like Grace and Lead, where there's a coordinated support system that crosses service provisions and helps navigate and advocates within those systems. And so I don't hear us talking about that. And that seems to me, if I had to say one was more important than the other, it would be that latter part. And so I don't think we have any resource like that in sight. And it seems to me that we should be concentrating on that at least as much as these very welcome potential developments Jackie was talking about.
I just wanted to address something you said, Stephen, which is that when we have the position filled, which it hasn't been for a year and a half, it does go out into the community. This person does go out into the community and works in the jail. I mean, they start in the jail to try to connect people, to try to do a needs assessment, and then they do a service plan and try to connect people with services on the outside. And then the peer person would come in helping to make those connections to the community as well. So, I think it's not that I'm saying it's enough. I don't think it's ever enough, but it'll be more than what we had before if we're successful in our negotiations.
That's helpful, Jackie. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. Heather?
You're muted, Heather.
Sorry about that. I was just saying this is all probably maybe obvious things that you all know, but I want to say it. That what we wrote in the ARPA letter around recommendations for funds was support for pretrial and reentry, particularly because one, the backlog of cases, and two, those are really vulnerable times in somebody's journey through the criminal justice system. And the research I have read actually talks about how reentry should be the mindset of every single person from arrest all the way through to out of the jail. And so it's more than, yes, I agree wholeheartedly with Stephen that what are the systems of support that we can divert people to? Is there even specialized housing? There are some drugs at this point that completely alter people's minds beyond being able to, function. We know this, that this is a hard population to serve. So yes, we need all of these things in the community, and we don't have enough of that either. But what about the training for everybody within the system too? Are police officers also having that mindset of, like, is the goal here really public safety and rehabilitation, or is it punishment? And those are different mindsets from arrest all the way to reentry. And then we see that in our recidivism outcomes. So I just wanted to say that, and however we can build support for that. In that moment too, Sheriff Elfo, I don't know if you have stats. I know Wendy does a ton of support in the jail as well, but not having somebody to pick you up when you get released, even just that simple thing can make a world of difference in someone's trajectory. And then that kind of comprehensive thinking about, like, what's the right environment for this person to go back to, and is there an opportunity or an option that is somewhere else a better environment, so that they're less likely to just fall back into the same patterns. So I get that it's complicated, but sorry.
Oh, I was going to add, Heather, I'm sorry to interrupt you. That
No, you're good.
would almost be a decision for the courts of where they're put conditions of release, because when they're ordered released, our job is to unlock the door. Basically, we can't hold them, and certainly, we facilitate phone calls, but there's a lot of people that don't have anybody to call. So that assessment's correct.
Right. And then when I hear that, I think, gosh, wouldn't it be amazing if there was a person that could mediate in all of that? And if that person that's being released has no one, I know there are volunteers in this community who would love to be that somebody. And so that person could say, hey, we need somebody, we need you. Come pick this person up and get them some pizza and a coat and a blanket and whatever they need, right? It's like kind of the going back to the basics of how are we really helping people?
Thank you, Heather. I concur with everything you said. And even pre-COVID, when people were going to the jail without the restrictions, which I can't quite remember when, but it's not just mental health. It's not just drug addicted people. It's everybody that goes to the jail. And as Sheriff Elfo said, his job is to unlock the door once the order comes out. And if I go to the judge and he said, well, you got the pretrial order, you got the no contact order, we tell them where they're supposed to go after they get released, but it's not your job to hold them hand and get them out. So you're exactly right. And we need a navigator that's outside for each and everybody that goes out saying, do you have this and that? Unfortunately, I get the calls from family members, and sometimes we can send them to the DV advocate, sometimes we can't, but they're saying, do you know when this person's going to be released? Well, I don't know, because I don't know how busy the jail is going to be at each given time for each defendant. I can tell them I sent the release paperwork down to the jail, but I don't know when that person's going to be out. It could be any time from 2 to 10 tonight. I don't know those answers. And the jail doesn't always have the staffing to answer each and every family member's question because they're busy booking people in or releasing people or dealing with somebody that's having a mental health crisis. So I don't know if it's inside the jail and that you need that person that's just going to be answering those calls and working in between everybody, or if it's outside of the jail to make sure that they have somewhere to go, that they have a phone that they can use, that they can get emergency housing when they've just been told that they can't go back to their home because there's now an order in place. So there's lots of questions there, and I really appreciate all your input, Heather. And I do see Arlene's hand up, so I'm going to go to Arlene and then Sheriff Elpo.
So can you hear me? Okay. Quite a while back, we had a report from an organization that was doing reentry care, and I think it was Goodwill. Some of you all might remember this, but their program was very extensive and included many of the issues that you are all talking about. But when COVID started, I believe that program stopped entirely. And so it probably would be worth reaching out to Goodwill to see if they could be available, but they were offering every step along the way and all kinds of training for job training and hooking up for jobs and housing. As far as housing is concerned, it's absolutely essential part of this process. And there is more and more funding coming down for housing services. The jail treatment needs to be available within the jail. And my memory of our discussions about that in the past with Wendy were that there wasn't room, there were not spaces for people to meet for counseling, for group therapy, for AA meetings. That was what she said to us. Well, maybe there'll be more space now that there are less people in the jail. I haven't toured the jail, so I don't really know if anything like that is possible. But so care in the jail is vital, and re-entry is vital. They are not more important than one or the other, I think, but just part of the continuum of care so that we are not going to have people cycling. And all along the way, we've never had enough. So this has been mentioned a number of times, but I'm going to repeat it because I think if you do something, you should do it correctly, and you should have the full staff that you need to have. Yes, okay, I'm gonna shut up.
Thank you, Arlene. I don't want to cut anybody short. We are running out of time, but I'm going to let Sheriff Elpo give his comment.
I'll just add that we sent a team from our jail up to Middlesex County, Massachusetts, which is a suburb of Boston. This was part of our medically assisted treatment for opioid addicts. And that's what they were successful were. They claimed their successes with the navigators, and they worked through the courts to the prosecutor and the defense to try to come up with an agreement on release conditions. And they not only follow up when they're released and they're off their probation or whatever conditions are on, they follow up and they go out and actively, but it's, very robust, and it's very well funded. And just to ask you, Arlene, anytime you want to tour the jail and look at the space, we'd be happy to provide it.
I'm going to do it.
Thank you, everybody. We are running low on time. I think there was some discussion on Behavioral Health Committee and some joint ideas throughout our discussion. So hopefully that will bring us enough into our next meeting because it's going to be the joint meeting through Behavioral Health. Other business, I think we need to look at our time because it seems like we are running short almost every meeting. So that might be a topic for the next meeting. And also share info on on what you just discussed. It might be beneficial for the next meeting after this on what they found out. And if we could get a presentation from those that went to learn about that program, if that would be an option for you. Is there any other business that anybody has that wasn't mentioned? Do we have any other outside participants that would like to speak for public comment?
We have 2 attendees right now. If either of you would like to speak to the committee, please virtually raise your hand by selecting the raise hand icon. And we have 1 speaker. Go ahead, Mark.
Hi, I know everybody wants to go to lunch, so just super quick, but I echo the comments about starting with regarding communication with just a simple dashboard on a web. It could be changed and added to over time. Digging into the details, race and charges and jurisdictions, et cetera, it takes time. But just to know how many people are in the main jail, how many people are in the work center, possibly split between misdemeanor and felonies, and then maybe by jurisdiction, things like that, really simple. And then some narrative to explain, the fact that the population is going down in the main jail is not necessarily because of, incarceration prevention. It's these hard limits that we have now because the jail itself can't accommodate people, et cetera. So I would say I was just starting really simple and get something on a web page that can be repopulated and improved over time. Thanks.
Thank you, Mark. If anyone else from the attendee list would like to speak, please virtually raise your hand now. And there are no other hands.
Thank you, everybody, for the robust conversations we've had on these topics. If there's anything that people would like to see on our next agenda or the joint behavioral health meeting, please let us know so that we can get that on the next agenda. Otherwise, have a great afternoon. Enjoy your lunch and thank you.